Now, in the interest of fairness, I will give Zolt the chance to fight to keep his bending.
You're gonna regret doing that, pal!
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Writer's Block, Episode 2, numero dos. I can't even pronounce it because I'm not Spanish. But anyway, welcome back. I am here, P-Dog, the screenwriter that no one knows about, and alongside me is the novelist that everyone knows about. TheAireaidLord is here.
Yes, hello. And my name's TheAireaidLord, not TheAireaidLord as P-Dog would. So.
Okay, but episode 1, we had a jolly good time talking about how we started off writing and our history with it, and you know what you need to be a writer. So if you're, I can't even remember what we were saying, but if you had all the traits that we conveyed in episode 1, then feel free to proceed to this episode where we will talk about you solidifying your choice. Oh, I want to write something, and we're going to show you what you should write and what you shouldn't write in this episode. So we're just pretty much going to clarify your very first steps to writing and what you should and shouldn't do. Yeah, and some of it will be on past experiences, some of it will be from experiences that we heard from other people, and some of it will just be like general pointers, I think.
Yeah, we'll go through the whole process of, you know, how do you start writing? You know, you have no what. Are you starting from scratch? Are you starting from other places? You know, where to start along the process? You know, like literally you've got the notepad, you've got the pen, you've got your brain, I hope, and you're sitting on your bed. You don't know what to do, so you come to us. Well, we're here to help. So, here we go. Alright.
Okay, so we have the traits from episode 1. Now, if you listened to all of episode 1, and I know that some people did, which is very good, that you might be thinking, oh, okay, that's good, I have all those characters and I want to start writing. Now, we're gonna tell, so you're probably gonna think, okay, I want to start writing. Boom. Your first writer's block. Okay, what do I write? Well, basically, let's take it from like our standpoints. Okay, so Chris, you wrote a science fiction, even though you don't like it being called science fiction, / adventure story called The Orb. Why did you choose to do a science fiction / adventure?
Well, as I mentioned in the, and I won't go too much into this, as I mentioned in part 1, I wrote it because it was an assignment that was given to me, and I continued with it. Also, at the time, I liked space. It was an interest of mine. I was into, wasn't really, it's funny because I didn't read other science fiction books. A common question that I'll receive nowadays when people see the book, they'll be like, oh, what science fiction authors do you read? I'm like, because the authors that I read they're not usually science fiction, because my book is, as Pete said, kind of like a blend of like fantasy, action, adventure, and science fiction. I don't really consider it 100% science fiction. So at the time, I was into aliens. You know, I liked the whole UFO mysteries. I was into a game called Destroy All Humans at the time, which was very, very interesting. And I like the whole mystery aspect behind aliens, and the whole outer space theme was something that I was interested in from just, you know, watching TV, reading books, movies. It was a form of entertainment that I found very interesting, and I decided to apply it to my writing when the opportunity presented itself, when my teacher offered us to creatively write a story, and I went forward with the scientific route of aliens and extraterrestrials. So that was how I got started.
A common misconception that people have is that if you want to write a book about horror or sci-fi or like history, you have to be like a professional in that field, so that you have to make it look as, you know, as convincing as possible. But that isn't necessarily the case, because obviously Chris doesn't really know a lot about, you know, the actual theory and stuff of science and astronomy and stuff. Obviously can't do that, and that's why creative writing is so good. It's not like a like a non-fiction article or something where you have to know what you're talking about. In creative writing, if you're creating like a brand new universe or something, you're pretty much like the god of this universe, and you can just customize everything, and you can like just say, oh, this happens because I say so, and it's because it's my book. So
Yes.
it's not as if you could just be, do a sci-fi and then just think, oh, well, I don't know much about aliens and stuff, therefore I'm kind of limited.
Very
'Cause obviously
valid.
that wasn't.
Yeah, that's a very valid point you brought up. What I'm doing with my book series is I'm creating a whole new world. Now, it's still in our present day era. That takes place in the year 2080. And, but here's the thing, because the majority of the book is taking places on planets that I made up, I can make up things about those planets. Something you're going to have to consider when you write, whatever genre you choose, you need to be careful, because I'm going to assume that it's going to be on Earth. The exception would be if it's in some sort of fantasy land or something that you created yourself, as I just explained. But everything that you're going to write, for the most part, is going to be based on Earth, and you're going to need to reference actual places, actual locations, whether it's a state, a country, a town, a road, maybe someone historical. You need to be able to prove to your audience that you, as the deliverer of this information, know about the topic that you're professing about. Because if you come to the table and you're not prepared to preach on what you want to write about, you're going to look unkempt to all of the people who are trying to understand your writing for the first time. So I would say the best thing to do, especially when you're writing, if you choose a topic, okay, let's say you choose thriller or horror as your topic, make sure you do enough research into authors who have done those type of books before. Also, make sure you, when trying to think of your story, understand the implications. Okay, if I'm going to set this story in Oregon, just for the sake of argument, the state of Oregon, where's it going to be in Oregon? Is it going to be on the West Coast, East Coast? Is it going to be in the northern part? Is it going to be in the forest, in a suburban neighborhood? Is it going to be in the city? Like, the location and the setting all means a lot to the story and stuff. And being able to, if you make up stuff about real places, it's going to sound weird to your audience.
Well, on the contrary, you could do something like that, but create a fictional state, as long as your audience knows that it's fictional. So for example, don't take a state like Connecticut and say, oh, it has this, this, and this, and this, and then people that live in Connecticut might be like, wait a minute, wait, what? No, we don't have that stuff.
Yeah, if you start saying Connecticut is a prosperous state and it's really good to its people, then you're kind of going a little bit of the fantasy route there.
Whereas if you created your own state, like if you wanted to create like the state of Hillside or something like that there, and then you could say, oh, it has this and this and this and this, then obviously people will think, oh, well, there's no such state as Hillside, but they'll still be like, oh, well, we can understand now why it's got this and this and this and this, because the author himself or herself is actually utilizing it in that way. Alternatively, something that isn't really that common is making up your own country, unless it's like a rural island or something, like a place like that there. But for the most part, just stick to what you know is probably the safe bet. I kind of had a bit of a blunder in one of my stuff. Whenever I was writing a script for my fourth year, by the way, I would have been about 14, I guess, for school. And basically, I had to write a device piece, and I based it on three old men. It's called The Park Bench, and it was based on three old men. And basically, whenever I tried to expand on it, I realized that, they went in different fields. One of them went to the army. I know quite a bit about, the army warfare and stuff during, World War II, etc. However, someone else was in, the financial route, and he was, a big businessman. Then it came to my blunder, and I didn't really know what to write about. Because I was like, wait a minute, what do financial people do? And then I started thinking, well, I have to, do some research, or else whatever I write will be the complete waffle. And then, people actually or people that even know more about economics and stuff than me will think, okay, that's incorrect, and then they'll be, taken aback from it. Because stuff like that there can really, can really, hurt your product in the long term.
Exactly, yeah.
If you have, misinformation.
I think what we should, we've given a lot of great tips on the initial startups of writing. I think we need to cover, like I said earlier, if you're somebody who's just starting out for the first time, how do you think of ideas? I think this is a good thing, because people always struggle. They see a great movie, or they see a book with an amazing plot, and they're like, wow, how did that author think of that story? You know, they didn't just one day in an hour come up with this story and just, you know, it just like magic, it popped into their head. It took a lot more thinking. And I'm going to offer two different perspectives, and I'll cover one of them, and Pete will cover the other one. The first perspective I'm going to cover is writing on what you know, okay? Basically writing, because there's a statement that my creative writing teacher said, that writers always write, and this has been true since people started writing for professions, that writers write about what they know, what they see in their world, what they perceive to be real, what they perceive to be not real. And this is true in transcendentalist American writing. You know, you've got, you know, Washington Irving's writing, you know, because of their upbringings. Maybe Edgar Allan Poe, his is a bit very gothic and dark because of his upbringings. You can definitely understand a writer on almost a personal level by reading their stuff. So if you're sitting down and you want to write about something, think about what you know. Maybe as a goal for yourself, write down on a piece of paper 10 things that you know to be true about yourself. This is a very simple task you can do. Right now, on a piece of paper, write down 10 things you know 100% to be true about yourself and your life. Now, out of those 10 things that you just wrote, which one of those jumps out at you the most? Which one is calling to you as something that could be a story? You know, could it be, is it something in your family history? Is it a friend of yours who impacted you perhaps? Is it something, maybe a sport you play? I don't know, just anything. It could be anything. Something that you think you can tell a story about, and then go off of that. And then you can branch. There's things you can do. You can do webs. You can branch on paper and have different topics connect. This is a great way to get a plot going. And as I do this with my writing, as I played that clip for you at the beginning, I watched some of those clips to get ideas flowing in my head so that the thoughts are more free-flowing, so that I have a better basis on how I can write and think about how the story is going to go. Now, it's not always clear. Most of the time when I write, I always think about the beginning of the story, and then I think about the end of the story, and I say, okay, this is what's going to happen at the beginning, and this is where I want to get to. It's that middle area, that's the gray area, that I got to fill with description and text and character and development and plot and setting, and it's got to somehow work so that it brings me to this end that I intended. And sometimes you'll find that as you're writing, the end may change. Like, you'll be writing the middle, and you'll be like, wait a minute, this is a little different on how I intended it to be. It's looking like things are playing out in a different way. And I've absolutely 100% had this happen to me, where I've expected my story to turn out this way, and in reality, as I wrote the middle, I was inspired to change the story to something else. So, I can say that. Absolutely write about what you know in your life. It is the thing that'll help you the best. And I think I'd like Pete to now talk about, like, if you are having a real trouble trying to think of an idea, / perhaps maybe you're writing down ideas and nothing really jumps out at you, yet you want to write something that's more, you know, fantasy. Well, I don't want to write something about my life. You know, maybe I just want to write something about something that just, you know, interests me in general. Here's a topic I want to choose. How would I just get started on that topic? So I'll have Pete discuss that a little bit more.
If you want to write something about just a general topic, obviously you have to, like we were saying before, be wary of what you're going to write about. Be wary that you may have some problems and stuff. You may have to do some research, but but research doesn't exactly hurt, obviously. But yeah, I've done several stuff which required me to, like, I don't really know much about, like, the genre as to which I'm writing about. Like, I've written quite a lot of stuff. I've written comedy, I've written straight, I've written, like, tragic and stuff. As I said last time, I'm a screenwriter, so obviously some stuff, like, I'm kind of exempt from certain stuff than Chris is, because Chris, whenever he has to write a novel, he has to detail every single thing. For me, I can be a bit more lenient in terms of, like, what the people are hearing. So in terms of, like, dialogue, maybe I'm a bit more lenient for it. But what I would do is, like, if I, like, say I have some hobbies such as, like, I have, like, Street Fighter, I have video gaming in general, but Street Fighter is one of the bigger ones. And yet, like, I do think that it can help, like, writing about a general hobby, because then if you're writing about your general hobby, you know a lot about it, and so obviously stuff is gonna, like, spring to you, and, like, and for example, what came up with my my new series, which I'm writing about me and three of my friends, that was a time whenever I didn't really know what to write. That was at the time whenever my park bench stuff was starting to crumble slightly because I was starting to lose interest and realize I wasn't actually very knowledgeable of some of the stuff I was writing about. And so during the time I was doing research for that, I figured, well, is there anything else I can write about? And so I figured, well, I can't really write that much stuff about me and my personal life, so how about I write it? And then I kind of figured, well, wait a minute, there was a weird period of time when I was talking to, like, these dear friends of mine, and we had a really close relationship. How about I do something along the lines of that? And then from there, I just kind of figured, well, maybe, like, not that much happened for me. I'm kind of like, nothing really changed for me that much. However, if I put it in the point of view of someone else, then maybe the audience can relate to them a bit better, and then you can move on from there. And so, whenever you're actually thinking about, like, planning something like that, then obviously you have to think about, like, certain stuff that will, like, satisfy your audience. For example, whenever we're doing in media, we're learning about theorists and stuff, and a very famous media theorist, Todorov, he had a theory about the equilibrium theory, in which every single story and everything you ever see, pretty much, this like a moving narrative, has a starting equilibrium, the break of the equilibrium, the chain of events to the new equilibrium at the end. And so if I was to put this into some practical example, say if there's a very generic alien invasion movie, the beginning equilibrium would be like, the Earth is at peace, etc., etc. Then the break in the equilibrium would be the aliens landing on Earth and a big war going out. The chain of events would be the humans trying to fight off the aliens, and then the new equilibrium would be the aliens defeat it, and then the humans back at peace. Therefore, we pretty much went a full circle, and it's just a case of entertaining your audience for that whole circle duration and making it quite a meaningful one. Because if you kind of put it like that way, like maybe all the equilibriums is like the same. Like the starting equilibrium will always be the end equilibrium in the end. If all stories were like that, it'd be quite bland, and like it's why a lot of people don't really like cheesy endings. Where if you see like a kids' film, always resorts to having a beginning and ending equilibrium being the exact same, where the outcome is like the exact same. You know, everyone's all happy and stuff. Or maybe it's like the other way around. Like, for example, in like a story like Cinderella was very like upset being bullied by like her two sisters and evil stepmother, and at the end of it she was like marrying the prince. So like stuff like that can always be quite good. But stuff that I really like twists in it. So if once you do start to like think about stuff to do, then you could obviously think of like the most linear plot ever. Like, okay, this happens, like say someone has to go rescue someone else. He rescues at the end. Like, okay, that's fine, but I mean, writing can go much deeper than that, and that's where you can get all kinds of like stuff. And we'll go into this later on in the stories or in the writers' blocks, where you can definitely find ways to like tweak stuff. And I really like stuff where it's like a single bluff is quite good, where maybe like, oh, the villain was actually the good guy in the end. But then I also like the triple bluff, where maybe it's like, oh, a double bluff, where maybe it's like the villain was actually a good guy, but no, while he was the good guy, he was still a villain. And then like stuff like that I really like, and like especially if you can like how many times you can really do it, because I really love stories where like everything's intertwined so well. A very good novel, which is one of my favorite novels I love to read, is called Holes by Louis Sachar, and he tells like 3 stories in one book. And you start to think, well, what the heck has this got to do? If anything, he's just telling 3 stories. You have the main story with Stanley Yelnats. Then you have, like, another story about Camp Green Lake, which is where he's staying at. Then you have, like, another story about his grandfather. And you're starting to think, well, what the heck is going on? By, like, near the end of the book, you start thinking, and then stuff starts, like, making more sense and weaving together very nicely. Which is why sometimes it really pays off to go the extra mile and to try and find things that you can, like, really, like, trick with like the audience and stuff. For example, I have ideas for my series. Like whenever it gets quite story driven, I know some really good like twists I'm gonna do, and like maybe some stuff that no one will ever expect.
Yeah, Pete has told me. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but you've told me some of these, and I thought they were really, really good.
And likewise with Chris, like some of the stuff that he said. For example, some of the things that happened in his book, I'm not going to spoil it, but there are some stuff near the end of it. Whenever you start thinking, oh, that was similar to this, or oh, this guy returns, blah blah blah. So stuff like that there can really like help out. But yeah, in terms of just, but yeah, I kind of got a bit sidetracked there. But I think just thinking about stuff to write about, either write about yourself or write about either characteristics of yourself or write about statistics or general facts about yourself. Like, you play football, okay, well, is there anything that, like, try and write about stuff that's kind of like extraordinary that's happened in whatever you do. So you could have like, you play football. Was there anything like special that happened in football? Maybe it was like your journey to be like a really good footballer. Maybe that could like warrant, maybe if you, like obviously it's very rare for an author to write about, like, unless it's a biography, he wouldn't write about like his journey to something like in the most, like in, like would the being the most factual. Most writers would always start writing, but then start like exaggerating stuff and maybe start blowing things out of proportion. For example, a very good example is the series I'm writing now. Most of the stuff that I'm initially writing is all true. However, there's some stuff that I felt, well, if I just wrote it like the same way as what I write it now, you know, then the audience isn't gonna like it as much. For example, an example within an example, in episode 2 of my series, me and one of my friends meet a third of our friends, like another person is gonna be our friend, and truthfully, we actually really liked this guy whenever we first met him. But then I kind of thought, wait a minute, that'll make for a very boring episode because, you know, what's the fun in just having an episode where two guys play a game, they hear someone, they think he's hilarious, they become friends, the end. Like, there's no substance in it, there's no breaking equilibrium, there's nothing there. And so I figured, well, what if I had some sort of like conflict where maybe we didn't like the guy at first, and then we have to save him from a situation that adds much more like enigma and like energy into it. And so I do think that stuff like that there you can really think about. But yeah, for now, just think about ideas, and then once you can think about that, like, I was mainly just thinking there about plots and stuff that you could think about. So this would be about like general ideas and setting up like a plot, a believable plot where your audience can actually believe into it. And so I think that now we should talk about, okay, so you have all these crazy ideas, but here's something I had to think about whenever I was writing mine. What type of literature do you want this to be? Would you like this to be a novel, a screenplay, a non-fiction? Well, you know, whatever you would want it to be. And so I guess Chris and I will talk about the pros and cons of our chosen, like, written forms of literature, in which obviously Chris is in novels and mine is in screenplays. And so I guess you know, while I get my voice back, I guess Chris can talk about about why probably the most common choice of literature being novels, and you know, and what it might cater to, depending on what your ideas would be.
So for novel writing, it's more of a process of developing your voice through your writing, and also knowing, I mean, it's not really, I know some people think, oh, you know, I'll get a dictionary and I'll memorize 100 words and I'll write them down on a piece of paper, and, you know, all this extra vocabulary that people will find interesting in my writing. With writing a novel, yeah, Pete said this, and he says it in a way, it's writing about everything. And when he says everything, you're describing all the details. You know, the character entered the room, you know, how are you going to describe the room he's in? Is it dark, cold? What's in the room? Is there nothing in the room? Is there something in the room? Is there a person in the room? You know, how's the lighting? Also, senses. Big thing that people miss nowadays is with their senses. You know, smell. You know, what was the smell of the room? Did the character, you know, feel anything? You know, did they see, hear? You know, there's all sorts of senses that you can go off of, and the right combination of those senses in the right way can really make for some great writing. What if you mixed it up? What if you were going to a room and say, I smelt, you know, the aroma of the pizza coming from, you know, the oven. You know, I went over and touched the stove, and, you know, I jumped back at its intense heat. So that's just a brief example, but something to that degree where mixing up the emotions, or the feelings and the senses, I should say, gives people a chance. You're not focused too much on one feeling so people don't get bored. You're jumping from each feeling, and if you can bring all those feelings together, your readers will be like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense, and you can bring it all together as one. But the pros of writing, you know, for novel writing, the pros, obviously, you have a lot of the ability to insert lots of literary devices. You've got, you got similes. You can do all sorts of paradoxes. You can do, trying to think of the term. It's, do you know what the term is? It's like where you use, it's like some sort of symbolism. Do you know the term when you constantly use a term in a book?
Repetition.
A motif. Motif. There's themes. There's literary devices that you can use. Parts of symbolism. There's symbolism's huge. Like, you know, her face, like how you describe somebody, an average character, their eyes were dark. Well, does the darkness in their eyes mean, maybe their eyes are just dark, maybe you might, as a reader, you might overlook the fact that their eyes are dark. Or that might have an implication as the true person that they are. Those little hints, the irony, there's always irony, maybe a character says something that completely contradicts something that they said a couple of chapters back, and you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, that makes no sense. That character is contradicting himself now and is going back on his beliefs, and he's starting to change, and that's where you start to see your character development. So novel writing allows you to insert all of these literary devices, combine them in any way you want, and then by the end of the book, you'll have all of these devices together, and you'll have a product from these devices, from your story, your plot, your characters, your setting, everything that goes into a book. The combination of all that will be your finished product and how people receive it. Now, again, don't misunderstand. The purpose of novel writing isn't to fill your book with a bazillion symbols. Don't, like, every paragraph go, her eyes were strangely white, and then the next paragraph, his eyes were strangely dark. Like, don't make it, like, insanely obvious that you're trying to send a message to the reader. Subtle little things. When you think the conversation is going normal, a normal conversation between two people, or there's a normal circumstance, maybe a character's walking home from school, he's taking the bus, simple activities, mundane activities. Mundane is a great word. Mundane means average, every day, something that's expected of an average person to partake in on a daily basis, something that your mind glances over because it's so commonplace, but then something's added into that circumstance that makes you step back and say, whoa, okay, this is different. I'm seeing something a little different here in this circumstance. I might want to analyze this a little farther and see where the story is going to go. So that's what I love about novel writing. You can bring your readers on an emotional ride, not only through dialogue, but you can bring them through the art of all of the literary devices. Now, I'd say the cons, it's not always easy to do what I just said. It's not easy at all. It's not like when I write, I'm thinking of symbolism. Most of the time when I think of the symbolism in the themes and the motifs as I'm writing, I'll be writing a character's description or theme or something that happens, and then I'll think of the end, think about what I said earlier in this podcast. I think about the beginning and I think about the end. This is something I think everyone should do when they start writing and you have a plot. Think about the beginning and think about where you want to end. The middle is the gray area. You're not going to think of that immediately. You might have some ideas trickling around in there, but you're never going to get all the details at once, okay? The beginning and the end. Always think about that, and always think about, okay, how am I going to piece this together 100%? And again, it doesn't have to, writing is never going to be perfect when you first do it for the first time. You're always going to have trials and tribulations. There's a quote, writing is rewriting. You're going to rewrite your script or your novel 100 times. You're going to be doing it multiple times. You're always going to be, as of now, I'm still rewriting my first book. Still putting in things here and there when ideas come into my head. My work is really never finished to a degree. Now, I know my work's it's also not published in the sense that a publisher has ownership over it. It's self-published, which means I make the profit from anything that I sell. But with my work, I can basically change it because, again, it's not like it's a final version that's out there. I can change it and stuff. So, again, the cons, getting to that point is difficult. It takes a lot of brain activity, a lot of thinking. Usually, and we'll probably have another podcast entirely for this. But when I write, I'll usually listen to a variety of music that I have, usually instrumental stuff. It could be, like, I usually put on, like, rainfall. Like, there's, like, on YouTube, there's clips of, like, rainfall, just, like, constant rain for, like, 8 hours, because it numbs the brain subconsciously and it lets you focus on what you're doing. So things like that help me write, but we'll get into that topic at a later time. But those are the pros and cons of writing. Again, for most people, you'll have the writer's block, which is the name of the series. You'll have that constantly. And the best way to overcome it is to, not get angry. Take a step back and relax. Maybe, again, it's always good to do this, always good to write down. Like, if you're stuck thinking in your head, write this out, because it's physical, it's on paper. You can write it out and say, okay, here's where I'm stuck. I need this scene, again, beginning and end. I keep coming back to that point, beginning and end. All right, write it out. Okay, this is where I want to end. This is where I want to start. This is the problem I have. I'm at this scene. I have this character. I have this incident. This is what I need to happen. How am I going to get there? Then write some offshoots and write that stuff. And that stuff's always going to be there. So if you have new ideas, you can come back to it and say, oh, okay, that idea combines with this idea. Maybe I can do this. Oh, that would work. Stuff like that. That's how your ideas can come out. Instead of getting frustrated, being at your computer kind of just feeling tense, or however you're writing, feeling tense that you can't get the words out. It's always good to take a step back and take a break and always consider where your beginning is and where your end is. So those are the pros and cons of novel writing. So Pete can tell you about how script writing goes.
Screenwriting, screenplay writing, script writing, etc, etc. Right. Well, an interesting thing, it's kind of weird that we're even putting these in the same category, because they're both very different in how they portray themselves. Whenever you write a novel, you obviously know, okay, this is the way my audience is going to read what I am looking at right now. Maybe it won't be in the Microsoft Word document that you have it on, but once it's put to paper, that's what your audience is going to look at. With a screenplay, you're looking at the sheet of paper and you're like, my audience is going to be looking at this. You don't go to the theater or a cinema to watch loads of paper being turned. That's not obviously the point of it. Screenplay writing is all about writing what the audience is going to see. And so that's why you have all these implementation, that's why you have the inclusion of stuff like stage directions and actual dialogue spoken by people. And so it's much more of an expensive thing to do. If you were to say write and direct it, some people have, Ben Affleck has done it, I think Spielberg has written something, Quentin Tarantino was another big one that does it. Obviously it's a very expensive thing, but the pros of that is that at least what you've written isn't going to get shambled and stuff, like we said in episode 1, isn't going to get shambled by a director or anything. It says, no, I want it this way, and then having your work being completely destroyed. So that's one of the cons, I would say, as well. It's a pretty annoying thing that you should know that if you're writing something to give to someone else, a director, you know that it's going to be it's not going to turn out the way that you'd want. Well, it may, but I mean, for the most part, the director's going to be I don't really like what you've done here, let's change it, blah, 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 beyond your control, because they bought the script from you. However, you do get a lot of, in terms of what you're doing for yourself, and what you're doing, say if it's for me, and John C.J. Graham is another person, he writes and directs all the stuff that he does. And so, one of the good things that you can do there is that you can pretty much decide what you're going to see and everything, because it's no lie that media and digital stuff, videos and visual entertainment is getting much more popular than written entertainment. And that's why cinemas and Blu-ray and all this crazy all this HD filming and stuff is getting much more popular than written literature and novels, which is kind of unfortunate for them. But I mean, as for the film industry, they're getting lots more money, and so they're starting to really blossom. And that's why screenplay writing has kind of been on the rise. Over the course of the past few decades. Therefore, whenever you're writing it, you can just picture, that your audience is going to enjoy, and you're going to get probably a slightly bigger audience. And so you could probably think to yourself, okay, well, now at least I can visualize everything, and now you have this added ability. Say if you are doing something like me and John C.J. Graham is doing, where it's you are pretty much doing everything yourself, that gives you so much scope as to what to do. Because now you can actually pitch yourself. If you want to do some good cinematography, you can do it. You can write it. If you want to have a character look like a certain way, you can do it. If you want a character to speak in a certain way, you can do it. I mean, and stuff like that. It's just you're very open to stuff. You probably have a lot more options than you do in novels. Where in a novel you can just you can entertain your audience with your choice of language and linguistic skills. Whereas if you're doing something an actual media thing and you have to use a screenplay for it, you can add so much stuff cinematography, camera work, close-ups and stuff, and distance shots. You can do voice, you can do facial expression if you're doing a live-action one. You can have music, you can have non-diegetic music. You can have all kinds of lots of stuff that can really affect an audience, and that's why a lot of people say that movies are they're a lot more emotionally driven than novels, because you're actually visualizing someone's experience. If you were to have a movie of someone's struggle, and maybe it's a really depressing movie, and it's about someone's struggle to try and escape from depression, but they can't do it. It's much more powerful you know, you like looking at the guy and actually seeing like his face and stuff. And that's why like advertisements for like charities and stuff are much more like have much more of an impact because you're actually looking at what you're seeing. You're actually looking at like the poor children and you know the really poor conditions in Africa, and so it hits you a lot harder. Which is why you can now know that whatever you're visualizing packs much more of a punch, and that your characters don't just have to be like written in, and they have to be like, and like your characters don't just like you can have like the characteristics written in, but you can show them a lot more and they can exaggerate them a lot more if you're doing that. However, that does lead to one of the cons where in a novel it's much easier to just say a character is like this or this or this. In a screenplay, you have to pretty much make it evident through maybe their actions or facial expression or voice. Like, you're gonna have to try and really make it out, like, oh, this is the bad guy, and we're gonna have to show it through this, this, and this. Whereas if you're reading a novel, you can kind of make it very subtle that this guy maybe isn't a bad guy. However, if you're doing something through there, unless you're very good with, like, cinema and writing, then it'll prove to be a very tough challenge for you in order to try and have much more depth in your character development, and it takes you a lot longer than it does in maybe a novel.
Now
so
I
guess,
want to... Oh, sorry, you done, or I was...
No, I was pretty much just gonna say that if you are someone that prefers visualizing something rather than just having something on paper, then I would definitely pursue a more of a script writing thing. Just understand, you know, like locales and stuff, and some of the technicality of it, and just understand like some of the problems you might face in it, because there's a lot more problems. Believe me, whenever I started writing the series, I knew there was going to be so much more problems writing as a screenplay rather than writing as a novel. And I know that's because I'm going to have to put in a lot of work for this series, but I know that it will pay off in the end, and that's what I know. So that's pretty much it for screenplay writing, I would say.
So now that we've both given our perspectives on the form of writing that we do, I'd like to offer two things. I'd like to offer an experiment that we could do, and we could present our findings maybe in the next episode or in a future episode. And I want to hear what Pete said. I've never told Pete this. Usually this is an idea. We each write a creative story. It can be about anything. You know, it could be maybe an extension from my book. It could be anything. However, we both need to change the way in which, like the writing, the writing in which we're doing. So Pete would have to write it in novel form, and I would have to write it in screenplay form. Do you like this idea? Because I'm gonna...
Oh, yeah, it could be yeah.
So, I'm announcing this on, the second episode, and, I don't know what episode, it would either, for episode 3, I'll mention this at the end of the podcast, but we're trying to get, a guest on who does comic book writing.
That's another interesting, like, version of,
yes.
creative writing.
And we were gonna see his perspective. He responded to me, but since his response and I gave him the dates, I haven't received a response back as of yet. But we'll see where that goes. But this would be maybe an interesting project for maybe perhaps episode 4 or something, where we would come back and maybe read... I don't know if we'd read everything we wrote. Maybe we'd read a couple of lines or sections, but we would tell each other what we felt about our experiences. How did it go? Did we really struggle? What did we find? Like, were we open to a new way of writing? Like, because we don't really go that route. So, was this different? Was this helpful? Was this bad? Was this good? Things like that. And we'll ask each other both those questions, and then read sections from our writing to reinforce what we're saying. And then we'll give you guys a perspective, because this is very interesting. Because for you guys who want to try new stuff, this will give you a taste as to how writers do new things for the first time and kind of go on this new path, like not having much knowledge. Maybe I have to do a little bit of research for script play writing. Maybe Pete has to understand a little bit about how to develop characters through novel writing, stuff like that. So that's an interesting idea. The other thing I was going to discuss, and I'll have Pete elaborate on this more right now, is how could the two combine novel writing and script writing? Because I've always had the notion for all, as I've been writing the novel the whole time, I've had the notion that this story would one day be, in movie form, and if it was going to be in movie form, the book would have to be adapted to a script. So, I guess I'll ask Pete how, and I'll talk a little bit about it as well. How would that process go about of taking what's already in novel written form with all these devices and stuff, and how would you translate that to a script? as opposed to just writing a new story just as a script. Now you're taking a novel, a story that's already written and established, and now you're putting it into a different written form.
Well, it's funny because this obviously isn't a very foreign concept. I mean, everyone has seen that novels and books and stuff have been written for movies and stuff, and you see like screenplays, you see like famous movies, like obviously, you know, two big massive movie franchises that were started off as books, Twilight and Harry Potter. Those two are like the biggest ones. Maybe obviously Harry Potter having a bit more like taste in it than Twilight. But yeah, like those started off as books and then they got rewritten into like screenplays and stuff. And so the process in doing that it's very interesting in terms of, you know, my way turning it from a novel to a screenplay. You have to look at the imagery portrayed by the author and really see how that would look. Like, you have to kind of visualize it, which can be a very good, but yeah, a very bad thing, because you could visualize it and say, oh well, maybe it would look like this, this, and this. However, what you're thinking most likely won't be the same thing as, you know, the rest of the people in your crew and the audience and the author themselves, whoever wrote it. So it's a very risky type move, but it's something you're gonna have to do. And if you have like a screenplay writer, they're probably writing something like that. The director will probably have his or her like tastes on it and probably have their spin on it. So you really have to just look at the imagery, look at the characters and stuff, and see how each of them like are portrayed as. Because now you're gonna have to start visualizing these characters that people already knew of from books, and you know, describe like maybe, like for example, here's another Holes example. Holes was made into a Disney film in 2004, made into like a live action Disney film starring Shia LaBeouf or whatever the heck you pronounce his name. Basically, Stanley Yelnats in the novel started off as a pretty chubby kid who had like no energy. In the movie, they completely just scrapped that, and Stanley Yelnats is like a skinny kid. And I'm like, wait a minute, and that kind of like took me back a bit. Like, fans of the book might have to like take some stuff with a pinch of salt, because they might think, oh well, we visioned it like this, and maybe some stuff like that I personally feel is quite incorrect, because you're taking stuff that's on the book and just not even using it. And so, like, that's why sometimes screenplay writers can sometimes get a bit overboard and say, oh well, this is now our product, and they just start changing stuff all the time. Which is why I think a good relationship between the original author and the screenplay writer who's going to adapt it is very necessary. And sometimes even they turn it into like different forms. For example, there's Alfred Hitchcock, the 39 Steps, the film that they made, that got adapted into an actual play, like a playwright. And the guy actually who adapted it actually turned it into like a comedy, even though the 39 Steps is famous for being like a thriller. Like, some guys trying to make a run from the police, and yeah, this guy in play form, this guy like turned it into a comedy, which is a very interesting step. But yeah, I liked it because we're doing it currently for drama at the moment, and it's very good from what I've seen. So sometimes interpretations can work, but other times they can't, and so it's a very like risky move trying to do it from book to film. However, it's almost guaranteed that if you have something in a film form, and the film form is done good, e.g. Harry Potter, and some may argue Twilight, then it can be a very worthwhile experience. Like, J.K. Rowling is like one of the most richest people in the world right now because of her involvement in like the books and the films and stuff. And so, like, sometimes it can really pay off, but it's a gamble. That's what I would say.
Yes.
For trying to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is true about the author and the scriptwriter having to have a close relationship and such and whatnot. And you know, for my future, you know, if I was to in college be able to get my professors to bring this to the point where this was a published book and stuff, and I was looking for a scriptwriter, I've told Pete that absolutely I would get him on board to get, you know, involved with this and embrace his writing potential, because he has a great skill in this, and you know, he has interests in other fields and stuff. And as he said, he just said it's a gamble with the writing thing, because it's not a safe profession, because you'll never know if it's not a set wage. It's not like, you know, it's 10 hours a week or I don't know, something like that. But it's not a set wage. You know, it's going to be based on the profits and how the book does and stuff. And it's always good to have other options. And again, we'll save this. This will probably be for a future episode about taking writing as a serious profession and stuff. But basically, in terms of, you know, wanting to get, you know, combining novel and script form, you know, the possibilities are endless. And again, I said this in episode 1, how there have been many instances where many books have been translated into movies, and the movie form didn't do the book any justice, and the fans complained. And that's obviously a case where the author was really not into the project of the movie, and because of that it suffered. Or maybe he was, and the director was a very stubborn, maybe he was kind of one-sided and was like, no, I want to do things my way, and I don't want your input, and that kind of thing. So
I guess there you go. So I don't know how long we've been going for this.
I'm unsure. Yeah, I'm unsure at this point, but
no, so we talked about the pros and cons of our different forms of writing, some plot points and what you might think about, like why you should always think about the first and the last, and equilibrium theory, that you should always have a new equilibrium, like a current equilibrium, and then the new equilibrium at the end of each story. And I hope you learned a lot about this, and I hope you've written down all the stuff and knowing what you're going to write about. So I hope you.
Yes.
So like, if you actually did that challenge, fair play to you. I give you a little clap for doing that little challenge, a little sheet of paper, write down 10 things. If you did do it, that is, or unless you were just stubborn and were like grumpy cat and was like, no, I'm not going to do that challenge. But no, hopefully, so if you did do that, it'll be very good. And we really do hope that you, by the end of this episode, we do hope that you now understand, the basics as to what you could write about, and then understand like how a story should go, and like the very basic terms. Obviously, in later episodes, we're going to go into much more detail about stories and plot. But this is like a plot overview, and also about what form you're going to write it in, whether it be in book form or in novel form, or book or novel. No, in novel form or in screenplay form, or even if you really want to go for it, you could do stuff like comics or whatever. Or
yes,
but I mean that takes a lot of like, obviously that's kind of out of our.
And we don't know about that kind of stuff, so that's why I've been in talks with someone who does comic book writing, who might be appearing as a guest on one of our future podcast episodes, but we're not too sure about that. I will make probably a gaming update, or I'll update you guys somehow on the status of that. But I think one last thing before I end the episode here. I think it's great because Pete and I are both taking classes right now that it's for this. He's doing drama, which excels his script writing, in a way. I don't know if the class's purpose is to write scripts. Maybe Pete could talk about more about that briefly, but I don't think it's to write scripts per se. It's more to act it out. I'm actually taking a creative writing class, which is more for novel writing, and my teacher is forcing us to embrace different ways of thinking. He's forcing us to, like, for example, we had to do an assignment. We had to work with a partner and write an 1,000-word story from a main character's perspective, and he's going to be telling about a point in his life where his life really changed. And the goal is to keep the details sparse, yet still be able to tell what happened throughout the story. And because the details are sparse, you don't know much about certain things, and that could be an interesting literary direction that you can go. But it's great. My teacher's always forcing us to think about ways in which we could do our writing different. Maybe have you thought about writing the opposite gender? Maybe you've always written a male character. How about a female character? Different ways. And maybe it's things you've shied away from, but in my class, my teacher wants us to embrace different ways of thinking of writing and outside the box, so that when you get to the point where maybe you're forced to write from a certain character's perspective, you're not totally lost, and you can kind of think to yourself, okay, I'm a little bit more comfortable with this. So,
And as for my drama, it is more for just performing stuff. We still got ideas. Like in the start of the year, we were looking at like plays and stuff. Play is another form of writing that you can also do, but it's a lot more. It's a lot different because it's kind of like a more of a, like, obviously because it's live, then it's a much more of a different atmosphere, and it's very different. Like maybe we could say that for like a very like a special type of one, because it's very, maybe we could get like someone else who knows a lot about like playwrights or like playwriting to do something like that. Like I know stuff about it, but I mean I don't think I know enough to really warrant like me full on talking about, okay, you should do this, blah 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 blah. But like I will have to end up like doing stuff like screenplay writing and playwriting are kind of similar, except for like a few minor stuff. For example, like you can't obviously have like jump cuts or anything, or quick transitions unless you like really use the audience's imagination and stuff, blah blah blah. But for our drama, yeah, most of it is just like performing from an extract from a play, and like I said earlier, it was the 39 steps. Next year we will be writing a completely devised performance, and I think like for the past few years it's been like our warped reality on society And it's kind of similar to, there's a program going on British television, was going on, it's called Black Mirror by Charlie Brooker, he's actually a comedian, but he's also a really avid screenplay writer, which I think is really cool. And he has this really interesting warped reality in, like, the digital age, and he thinks that, like, before long, society will end up just being completely mindlessly ruled by, like, technology, and we won't know about it. And it's a very interesting series, and I'd like you, and, you know, if you want, you can check it out, but I really, like, adore it. And so, like, stuff like that there, I think is really interesting, and, you know, just, stuff like that there is very interesting, and I guess that is pretty much...
That is it? Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
I think that'll wrap it up.
Next week, what do you think it'll be next week?
I'm not sure. I'm uncertain at the moment. I'm not sure if the next one's gonna be an interview with the person who I've been talking to from Geekvolution about his comic writing and stuff. He expressed interest in being on it, but I haven't received a response yet. We'll see where that goes. If I don't get a response, then I guess, what would you say the next episode should be?
Probably expanding on the plot, I'd say.
Okay.
Because we gave a very basic, because the plot is the thing that drives everything. And so if you don't have a good plot, you're not going to have a good anything. And so I guess that we should probably start going into plot now, and then we'll start talking about twists and stuff, and the protagonist, the antagonist, all the important characters.
Yes.
I'll start talking about Dyer, who's another media theorist, and we'll talk about the roles of characters, and it'll be very fun. I think it'll be very interesting.
It's good. I always learn so much about writing, not only from myself as I speak, but I also learned from Pete about how he feels about writing and stuff. A lot of the things that Pete told me during this podcast are some things that I didn't even know. For example, in episode 1, I never knew that he was his work on the alien work when he was younger was so successful with the people in his community and stuff. And it's funny that he started doing that when at my age I started doing the same thing and stuff. And, yeah. Don't worry. We've gone down the route of saying all of our crazy similarities, but that's for another time. But I would like to say, and I'll say this in the next episode, we are going to be doing these on a Monday. I think Monday is the unanimous day for our writer's block, if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I guess so.
April 15th, however, is we're taking that off because the day before there's going to be a very special video. It's going to be a very important podcast-like video uploading on April 14th, so I'd like that to be the main one for a certain period of time. So I'd say the Monday after, which is good because I'm actually at the end of April. I'm taking a big trip out to California, and I won't be leaving until late Tuesday of that day. So Monday or Sunday we can do, because we do the recording Sunday and then we upload on Monday. So at least for that week we'll be able to get a next writer's block session out before I'll be gone for that period of time. So I do feel good about that. So
I hope you guys like the new logo as well that I made. I just kind of tweaked it a bit from earlier. Now you can actually see at the bottom, you can see episode 2 and whatever I've written on it. I haven't started it yet, so I don't know what's going to be on it. But you can see it there. So
some people have suggested, you should put gameplay or something. Like you should put something that's moving as an image during the period of time that we're talking. But it kind of
defeats the purpose.
It contradicts the point of the writer's block. This is about writing. If I'm going to put a clip of Call of Duty in, it makes no sense. Like, what if someone's searching for this and they're not a gamer and they're watching Call of Duty? They're going to be confused because they're like, okay, I came here for writing and I'm seeing someone get killed 100 times in a game that is overused and boring. There's no point in that. So we're going to keep it like this. Maybe if again, episode 2, new idea that I had, a pump-up clip I call it, where it's something that I like. It's from a TV series, but it's something that I'll watch every now and then to get an idea flowing in my head, like a high action scene, lots of tension that brings out an emotion in me that makes me write further. So I don't know if some people think like that. I'd say Pete does in different ways.
I could probably give you like a clip that kind of motivates me for the next
next episode. Pete can give his. We'll alternate. So this one was mine. The clip from The Legend of Korra where Amon takes Zolt's fire bending away. You can supply. You don't have to spoil it. It can be a surprise.
I won't. Don't worry.
It can be a surprise. And
I guess. So we also have that. We also have a little challenge that we're gonna do. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh,
I think it should be. We should each write like an extract from whatever we were writing. So, for example, for me, I just finished. Oh, I don't think I've told anyone this, but I finished writing episode 2 of my series, and I'm now in episode 3.
Woo!
Yeah. And so I'm probably going to start writing maybe like a random extract from one of those 3 episodes as a novel. I guess Chris can take an extract from his book and write it as a screenplay,
Yes.
and we'll both like read it. We could even like maybe make it available to like you or something. We could like upload
yes,
because there's some places that could do that, so that you guys can read it and see how we like set it out.
I have a website, TheAireaidLord.com, and I can customize templates and stuff on the website, so I can set up a different page. It could actually be for our podcast and our writing and stuff. I could actually, you know what, this is a great idea. I'll go on my website after this and set up that section for things. So you'll see.
Maybe we can have like small little tasters and stuff, maybe like practical examples and stuff. Like maybe if we're talking about plot ideas and we can actually start writing, like here's an example of what you should do when trying to build up a scene or build up a character. Here's what you maybe shouldn't do, etc., etc. Like you were saying that thing about don't go over the top about like subliminal messaging and stuff. So you could probably write a practical example about that and maybe like some more subtle stuff. Maybe even if there was like random stuff. We could both like tweak on that. It could be very interesting.
It could be very.
There you go. We just got an idea.
Yes, live and our ideas always flow live and in person. So thank you for watching episode 2.
I think before we go, there's one last thing. I think some people have been asking for. What do you think are our feelings in regards to having other people on, in terms of like interviewing them, maybe up and coming writers, or maybe.
Well, okay, so. The purpose of this podcast isn't like it's not to interview people. It's us as friends to give you perspective on writing, because we'll be saying this later, but we became friends, but it was through different means, and over time of us getting to know each other, we discovered that we were both writers and that we really loved it, and it was only a couple of months or weeks back that Pete had this idea that since we're such great writers that we should share our knowledge with other people. And he just recently got a computer that could sustain this type of, Skype calling stuff. So the opportunity presented itself and we did it. I feel with other people it would get awkward. Now, I know I asked that guy to give his perspective on the comic book writing and stuff, but what I'm doing with that guy, I don't know what his name is. He gave me some weird... What was his
Captain
name?
Something.
Yeah, Captain Logan, he said his name was. I don't know if that's his real name or not, but his purpose in coming on the podcast for episode 3 or whatever episode it's going to be, it's to talk about how to do comic book writing. It's not to interview him. I'm not interviewing him. Well, in a sense, I'll ask him about what his writing history is, but the purpose isn't for him to... It's not
talk about himself and be like, here's my stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's not
the film is going to be what he wants to say. So if we were saying something like, how would you develop a plot using like your comics and like your graphical images and stuff? How would you do that? And then he might talk about that. It's not as if we're going, okay, so what's your favorite food? Or something like that there.
Yeah, this is not an interview. This is not a book interview. I'm sure other people do that, so it's just for the purpose of doing that. And I don't know any other people who I could collaborate with. Maybe if you're a viewer, maybe if you have any suggestions, let me know. Perhaps it's fine. You can leave any comments. I always love hearing comments in the comment section. Last time, the comment with 5 likes or 6 likes is like that people like P-Dog's voice because it soothes them, and I tend to agree with that. Because
I would tend to agree with it myself as well. Yes.
Yeah. It puts me to sleep sometimes, but that's
the
story for no. That was meant in a good way.
Okay. That's fine. All right. So there you go. So that's episode 2 of the Writer's Block. We covered the basic stuff. Starting from episode 3, we're probably going to start getting into more technical stuff. We're going to start thinking, okay. So in episode 3, we're going to assume that if people are actually following along with this, and that'd be really cool if you actually did. If you would actually go by this step by step, by episode 3 you should probably have an idea in your head, maybe like a very basic plot as to what you think might happen. However, the basic plot isn't really that necessary because episode 3 we're going to talk all about plots, and then also whether you're going to write it as a book or whether you're going to write it as a screenplay or whatever you want. But basically, those are the 2 big ones. If you choose one of those 2, then you're on the high road to success, and they can take that from both of us. So I guess that's it for episode 2. I think I opened with it, so I'm guessing I shall end it again. Then next week will obviously be Chris doing it again, but it doesn't really matter that much. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed it. My name is PDog at youtube.com/PDog, on twitter.com/PDog and this has been Chris, obviously.
This guy has his channel description in the description of the video, yet he still feels
not enough. I must say it in the video directly to solidify it. Yes, and obviously Chris is here. Chris. Obviously, you know his channel because you're watching on his channel. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Writer's Block, and we will see you in episode 3 for Plot.